Welcome back, Black Knight Scholars. Mr. Deegan here yet again. Please turn to your Unit 2 VidNotes packets. Once you have your Unit 2 packet out, please turn to page number 6. We'll be taking notes from page 6 and page 7 today. On page 6 and 7 lives lesson number 3, entitled The Protestant Reformation. I'm holding in my hand right now a book, one of the most popular and well-read books in the world. It's the Christian Bible. And this edition of the Christian Bible is written in English. However, the first edition of the Bible was not in English. In fact, the first edition of the Bible and the early editions of the Bible were written so that the average person could not understand the Bible. One man, a German monk, Martin Luther, wanted to change that. And he started and sparked the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation. Let's break down this phrase. To protest means to fight against. Reform, to change the bad parts of something. Martin Luther wanted to change the Catholic Church and improve Christianity, so he used forms of protest against the powerful church. Christianity, before the Protestant Reformation and before Martin Luther, the church was controlled and guarded by the Catholic Church. During and after the Protestant Reformation, Christianity became more divided. Protestant faiths developed. And we're going to be talking about that today. Martin Luther did one thing to protest the Catholic Church. He wrote a series of complaints, 95 complaints, called the 95 Theses. And they argued that the Catholic Church was corrupt and needed to change. Not only did he write the 95 Theses, he also posted this onto a church door in Wittenberg, Germany, for all to see. What was in this list? In other words, what did Luther say in his 95 Theses? Number 1, he said Christianity should be about salvation by faith alone, not works, just by faith. Number 2, Luther said everyone is equal under God, and the Bible is the ultimate authority. You should not have a pope or a priest who is above the other worshipers. Everyone is equal, said Luther. Number 3, his third point in the 95 Theses, said that everyone should be allowed to read and interpret the Bible on their own. You shouldn't have to have someone to tell you what is in the Bible. You should decide for yourself what the Bible says and how you're going to use it in your life. Today, a guest lecturer is going to be taking you through the rest of the lesson. Mr. Max Finkston, a history teacher from study.com, is going to talk to you about Martin Luther, about the Catholic Church, and about the Protestant Reformation. Follow along and take notes.
When you ask a Christian, "What is your religion?" their answer probably will not be, "I'm a Christian." They are much more likely to say, "I'm a Baptist," or "I'm a Presbyterian," or "I'm a Unitarian." In general, most Christians identify themselves with a certain denomination or sect of their religion. This variety is not unique to Christianity. There are several denominations of Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and all the other religions out there. However, none can match Christianity for sheer numbers. There are approximately 41,000 different denominations of Christianity. Some of these denominations differ on fundamental notions. The Greek Orthodox Church does not try to convert non-believers, whereas evangelicals do little else. Other denominations differ in terms of practice. Compare the staid ceremony of Anglicans to the tongue-speaking spectacle of the Charismatics. Others are so similar, only initiates can discern one from the other. The only real difference between the Christian Church and the Church of Christ is that the former uses musical instruments in their worship, while the latter prefers to sing a cappella. And yet, with all of these differences, these denominations coexist peacefully. Churches of various denominations can be found within walking distance of one another. With all of these varieties living together in peace, it is easy to forget that about 1,000 years ago, there was only one sort of Christianity allowed in Western Europe, and that was the Roman Catholic Church. Following the Great East-West Schism of 1050, which divided the Orthodox East from the Catholic West, the Roman Catholic Church held unchallenged sway over the hearts and minds of Western Europe. Oh, they might have spats from time to time. Another country might elect its own pope. But by naming a pope, even those usurpers were still operating within the constraints of the Roman Catholic faith. They were just fighting over who would be at its head. No one who challenged the supremacy of the Roman Catholic Church was allowed to draw breath for long. Anyone who tried to start their own church, or come up with their own take on Christianity, was labeled a heretic. Their property was seized, and they and their followers died in the most horrible manner available at the time. The dominance of the Roman Catholic Church remained unchallenged for nearly 500 years. Then, in 1517, a German priest shook the Catholic Church to its very foundations. His name was Martin Luther. Luther was not a rebel. He wasn't trying to destroy the Catholic Church, or even start his own religion. All Luther was trying to do was to stop the Church from engaging in some practices that he considered unchristian. Luther's problem was with the Church's practice of selling indulgences. An indulgence is a remission of punishment for sins. You can think of an indulgence as a get-out-of-hell-free card. The Church had been in the practice of granting indulgences in exchange for good works and acts of piety for centuries, ever since Pope Urban II offered indulgences to crusaders in 1095. Luther questioned whether the Church had the authority to grant such indulgences. He believed that the only true path to salvation lay through faithfulness to Christ and his teaching, not through adherence to the ideologies and dogmas of the Catholic Church. Yet Luther probably would not have made a fuss if it weren't for the fact that these get-out-of-hell-free cards weren't actually free. Earlier that year, in 1517, Pope Leo X had made an unconventional move. Leo wanted to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, but he didn't want to spend his own considerable wealth to do so. This is not surprising, as Leo was a member of the wealthy Medici banking family, which dominated Florence. The man was more of a banker than a priest. Leo's solution was to begin offering indulgences in exchange for donations to the basilica's renovation. While these donations technically counted as pious works, Luther saw them as simple payment. To Luther's eyes, the Church was essentially selling salvation. He witnessed poor peasants giving up their life savings to buy an indulgence for a dead relative, in the hope of saving their loved ones from the tortures of purgatory. All the while, the Church grew ever richer. This was too much for Luther. Luther had read the Bible, something most people of his age could not do, since the only available translations of the Bible were in Latin and Greek. Luther saw nothing in the Bible that gave the Church the right to charge people for their salvation. The Church was supposed to be a spiritual sanctuary, not a marketplace. So, Luther set about writing 95 complaints with the Church's greedy behavior. These complaints are now called the 95 Theses. On October 31st, 1517, Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the church at Wittenberg and sent copies to the higher authorities of the Catholic Church. The posting of the 95 Theses is considered by many the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. However, it is important to remember that Luther was not trying to undermine the church. He was just trying to get them to stop making money off the business of salvation. Luther's 95 Theses spread across Europe like wildfire. Within 2 months, they were being read in cities across the continent. The next year, they were translated into German and printed on a massive scale, further fueling the controversy. Luther suddenly found himself at the center of the greatest conflict of his age. The Pope was not happy at having his scam with the indulgences exposed. He had Luther accused of heresy. A couple of years later, in 1520, the Pope wrote a letter to Luther, in which he banned any further distribution of Luther's 95 Theses, and demanded that Luther recant his heresy or face excommunication, or being cut off from the Church and its sacraments. This threat of excommunication was a big deal, since pretty much everyone believed that the only way to get to heaven was to receive the sacraments of the Roman Catholic Church. Since Luther did not think he needed the papacy to achieve salvation, he did not care if he was excommunicated. Luther publicly burned the Pope's letter, and thereby broke all ties with the Roman Catholic Church. Yet the Church was not done with Luther. The Church decided to hand Luther over to the greatest secular authority in Germany, the Holy Roman Empire. In 1521, Martin Luther was summoned to the Diet of Worms, a conference of both religious and secular leaders held in Worms, Germany. Once again, Luther was commanded to recant his heresy. He refused. The upshot was that Luther was condemned. The Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, published the Edict of Worms, calling for Luther's immediate arrest. Yet Luther's supporters would not let him be imprisoned. Instead, they spirited him away and hid him in Wartburg Castle. Not content to hide on the sidelines, Luther made good use of his exile. He spent his year at Wartburg writing various letters and treatises attacking the Catholic Church. His greatest achievement of the time was his translation of the Bible into German. Luther held the Bible as the highest authority, higher even than the papacy. He realized that so long as people could not read the Bible, they would continue to fall for the lies and deceptions of Catholic ideology. Luther's supporters smuggled his translation out, and soon printing presses across Germany were cranking out copies of Luther's Bible. The publication had the desired effect. All across Germany, people started reading the Bible and began challenging the authority of the Church. In fact, things started getting a little out of hand. When Luther returned to Wittenberg in 1522, he found the populace in nearly full-scale revolt. The mob was being whipped up by a set of radical zealots known as the Zwickau prophets. Luther drove the Zwickau out of Wittenberg and settled down to re-establish law and order. He founded his own Lutheran church in Wittenberg in 1526.
You are almost done, ladies and gentlemen, but before you are, please fill out the 2 summary questions on page 7. And once you're done with that, you're finished for today. Next lesson, we will talk about the supporting cast in the Protestant Reformation. Every good story has a good main character, but also has a supporting cast for the main character. Next lesson, we'll talk about John Calvin, King Henry VIII, Queen Elizabeth I, Jan Hus, John Wycliffe, and Johann Gutenberg. All of them were major players in the Protestant Reformation. Until next time, this is Mr. Deegan, signing off.